So when we sit in silent meditation, and of course, even during other times of the day, it applies. When we sit in silent meditation, normally we see thoughts rising. We see various thoughts rising, and these thoughts are of the nature of different movements in time, either into the past or into the future, and so on. And the normal tendency is to do something about those thoughts. We either want to control them or we run behind them, like the like we can see sometimes how a dog chases a car. In that way we chase thoughts, and or we try to be free of them by trying to control them and so on. If you look at it from a completely different perspective, the mind with its movement of thoughts is no different from a child in the room who is constantly prattling. So when we are in the presence of a child, let's say, and the child is mischievous, moving in different directions, if we constantly chase the child, giving attention, or if we try to chastise the child, control the child, either way, it always seems like the child overreacts. But if we simply remain observant, taking the posture of being curious of what this person is doing, then just that simple alert curiosity with which we look without getting identified puts it in the right place. So normally when thoughts rise, the first mistake, which is the root of all, is to think that it is my thought. And right there, we get identified with it. And then whatever we do with the thought after that is going to be only out of that false identification, either by suppressing it or controlling it or identifying with it, indulging in it, and all the rest. But if we are very clear in recognizing that thought is its own energy and it is not me, because it is just this energy rising, it is no different from a child playing in the room. I am not the thought because it is just happening on its own. If we look at it, it rises on its own and it has its own energy, and it is just going here and there seeking attention, just as a child would play seeking attention. And the mistake we make by identifying with it is how this little child, or we can even say like a monkey, is trying to draw our attention to itself. But if we are very clear in just looking at this activity just as someone in our room, it is like a constant roommate we have. It's another way to look at it. The most intimate roommate we have is our mind, and he is always there, and yet he is not us, because this activity of this entity, this roommate, this child, whichever way we look at it, is not anything to do with our control. He has literally, as it is said, a mind of his own. It is based on past conditioning, it is based on various vasanas, it is based on various experiences, and it is has its own energy, momentum, and he is no different from a third party who is our roommate, or as I said, a child, or even a monkey, it is just moving around, and it has its great utility, it has its great value, it is a wondrous power, and yet it also has got this crazy energy of constantly jumping around. So, to channelize that energy is to handle this energy without any identification. If we are very clear that it is just like any energy available, it is out there, it is, of course, within our brain, and yet it is not us because we can clearly watch the activities of this person. So, the attitude we can take is one of curious attention, because we actually don't know what the next thought is going to be. The next thought of this person, who we call me, is actually not me. He's just this entity within our head. The voice in the head is coming out of its own energy, its own conditioning, and all the rest. So, if we are very clear in this alertness, and that's why alertness is the only essential aspect of meditation. If we are very alert, then we will not identify with this fellow, but just see the activity of this fellow as something that is an expression of energy. And in that attention, without even any judgment of whether he is right or wrong, whether good or bad, just as we would see a child playing, we would just watch him with alertness, and then in that alertness, without getting identified, he falls into the right place. There is no flight into speculative future or into anxiousness or into worry, because whatever form in which this energy comes, if we simply just have this attitude that this is not me, and it is very clear it is not me because I don't even know what he is going to bring up next. So, when I have this attitude of curious, alert attention, then due to that attention, which also means free of false identification, it's only in inattention that we identify. We are When we are attentive, we don't identify with thought, we are able to alertly watch. When we are inattentive, we get instantly pulled into identifying with thought and get dragged along. So, being in alert attention is all this essentially what meditation is. And what helps with that is this insight that that which rises as thought, as mind, is not me, but but no different from a roommate or no different from a child in the room who's playing around. And when we have this attitude with which we look at him, then there is dispassion. There is no guilt associated with a bad thought. There is no pride associated with a good thought, because this is all just activity of this energy, which is not me. And when I have this clarity with which I alertly watch, then what we will find out is in that alert attention, the activity of this energy subsides because he thrives on identification. When the identification is not there, then this entity called the mind falls into its right place. It quiets down. And when we sit in meditation, in this attitude, we will find soon, very soon, that there is no activity, because this entity has nothing to do when there is no identification. And then there is nobody watching either, because the one So when we take this position of being curiously attentive, there is still this duality of witnessing the activity of this energy, and that witness instantly also automatically subsides into pure awareness. So, this is the way of going from being an alert, witnessing with awareness without any judgment, that takes us into completely still awareness. So, normally, when we tell ourselves that I have to be still, sit without any thought, all of this results in conflict. Instead, if we just simply take this attitude of watching with curiosity, with the clarity that this energy is just there and it is not me, and then we watch this fellow doing whatever he does, then he settles down because of this alert attention, and then the one who is alertly attentive as the witness also has nothing to do. When the energy settles down, then the alert attention dissolves into simple awareness, and all there is still awareness. So this is the essence of self inquiry. Even when we ask, this is another way, or rather to ask who am I, is to not identify what this person, the instant identification of I that goes with this thought is what is the root of all trouble. If we stay alertly in this way, we are not then treating this as I, then who is watching? Then that very watcher also subsides. So we don't have to verbally ask the question even as who am I, but all we have to do is have this alert attention, and automatically the false I is removed, and then the one who witnesses it is also removed, and all that remains is pure awareness. So, this is why in a verse, even in this beautiful work called Uladu Narpadu, Ramana Maharishi says that it is not by asserting I am awareness that one realizes, but it is by catching the ego where it rises. He says, Elumbum Agandai Elum Idathil. He says, the place where the ego rises has to be caught. So that means this alert attention. When we are alertly attentive, still and silent, but watching alertly, we catch the fellow rising where he rises, the moment he rises. And when we don't call him as I, as my thought, but just see him rise, and in that very alert attention, the moment he rises, he is keenly watched. And in that keen watching alone, he subsides on his own. We don't have to do anything except this clarity that it is not me. Because it is clearly not me, he has a mind of his own, as we said. And if we have this alert, intense watching, then in that intense watching, every moment when as this verse says too, every moment when the ego rises, we catch him instantly right there by just watching. We don't have to do anything, we just have to watch him. If we don't watch him alertly, then he pulls us into identifying, and we say it's my thought and I have to do this and I have to do that. And all this I gets identified with the thought because of not watching alertly. So if we watch alertly, then that alone keeps us in this space of dispassionate awareness of the thought, and that in turn dissolves into pure still awareness. And this can be continued also during the day, then every moment when we are engaged in any activity, the same attention can be there, where all activities can be simply watched. This voice in the head that rises during conversations, during work, during activities can simply be watched as this prattling of a child. And when there is something meaningful that comes up, of course, we have to attend to it. But otherwise, mostly it is just noise, and we can just watch it without any identification and thereby carry this alert awareness through the day. And that's where meditation comes in, is if we remain in this space now, especially when we have this time to sit still, then we are able to practice that quality of alert attention. So it is not a practice to gain any new skill. So the word practice is itself to be used carefully. So it is not practice in the sense of gaining anything new or attaining any new talent, but it is just the way of remaining alert that can be carried through the day. We make it very hard many times by engaging in so many different uh, types of studying or all the various texts that are there. All of them are pointing to just this simple truth. And that is why, famously, again, Ramana Maharshi said it's Ati Sulabham. He said it's so easy. So why do we make it so difficult? It's a question we have to ask ourselves. And the mind likes complexity. So we want to study, we want to know more and more of all the Upanishads or all the scriptures or all that is there. Yeah, it can drive away anger, it can drive away. All of these are just activities of this entity. And therefore, we don't have to. The root problem is inattention, as we said, because when you are inattentive, we become the angry man. There is anger, is the only truth. There is no angry man until we identify with the anger as me. And that's true with everything. So while it's quite all right to study scriptures, and there are beautiful scriptures, of course, Bhagavad Gita being so beautiful in bringing everything together, it's also important to recognize that all of them are just pointing to our own self, the true essence of our being. Therefore, we have to not read them also with an attitude of, I can get something new, but just reflect within what is it pointing to in our own being. So, in this way, the scriptures are very helpful. But if we have this attitude of, I have to learn scriptures or learn this and that more and more, then that is also the activity of the same entity. It is not me who wants to learn. It is just the same entity who says, oh, now I have to learn this, I have to learn that. We can watch that too, that this activity of this person who comes up with all these desires. So everything can be just simply watched. So that's why the simple truth is so direct, and yet it seems difficult for us because of the habit of identification. So all that is pointed to with everything is just to break this false habit of, or rather this habit of false identification. And there is all the various ways that are available, but all of them point back only to this simple truth that we have to be alert and attentive. There is no way around that.
Thank you for your commentary, Suresh.
Thanks,
What are
Gautam. Go
your
ahead.
insights on utilizing the Brahma Astra, the question of who is this I that blank? You fill in the blank. So when you're in self-inquiry and a thought comes up or a memory comes up or a bodily sensation, you could say, who is this I that thinks? Or who is this I that's bored? Or who is this I that's nervous? And in that, it's almost like it draws itself back to its source. Do you have any insight on that? You could say approach.
I think it's essentially just another way of saying the same thing, actually speaking. Because when we are asking the question, who is having this thought or who is having the sensation, it is clearly the answer comes as I am having this thought, or I am aware of this thought, but it is happening within my awareness, but it is just something that's coming up, right? So the when I look at a thought, the thought has, that's why it's always called a triad, right? It's the thinker, the thought, and thinking. Or the same is true with any feeling too, the feeler, the feeling, and the activity of feeling it. So the whole triad is rising with its own energy, and I am aware of it. So the primary mistake we make is we identify within this triad as the thinker, and therefore we divide against the thought, and then we say, I have to now do something about this thought. Either I am indulging in the thought or I am suppressing it. So the question, as you pointed out, who is having this thought, is simply a pointer right back inward to dissociate from the thinker and to see that I am having the thought and the thinker in my awareness. So the whole triad is rising in me. It is like, as we said, the analogy of, let's say, a roommate here in so he is in our head, and the actor and the action are all happening within my awareness. So I am the mistake I make due to inattention is to think this fellow is me, whereas this fellow, this energy, whichever way we can visualize, is just acting out of all the bundle of experiences and knowledge and conditioning that is coming up as thoughts and sensations and feelings and all the rest. So when you, as you put it, when we are asking the question, who is having the thought, it is the same. It again requires the same alert attention. And when we have this alert attention, then we can not be identified with the thought, but just be this alert witness of the thought by that question. And of course, then the thought dissolves. And if we are able to do that with every rising thought, then instantly the activity dissolves. The only important pointer is the key recognition. So we sometimes inadvertently or subconsciously think these are my thoughts and I have to now be free of them. And that right there is probably a trap. So all I was pointing to was these, to have the clarity that these are not my thoughts, These are just thoughts, and they are just there. It's no different from the tree there growing. The tree has its own energy to grow, and similarly, the thoughts have their own energy to rise. And as I can watch that tree, I can watch the thought. But that requires me to be clear that this is not me. That's all.